Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today, I'm going to guide you through the best decks in Alchemy Best of 1. This weekend is the Qualifier play-in weekend for Alchemy Best of 1. The following weekend will be Alchemy Best of 3. This is the monthly Arena Qualifier to make the Arena Championship. So the format's been decided. We're going to cover the decks that are the most played, the highest win rate, and kind of give you a rundown. So most notable for the people who are new to Alchemy, or haven't been following the metagame, there was a recent release with Dragonstorm Tarkir that came out about 2 days ago. It's on Tuesday, and it's had quite a bit of an impact, just shifting some of the stuff. We got some improvements to some of the existing decks in terms of like a new cantrip in red that's really pushed the Prowess, Corey Steelcutter decks. But the format tends to be still a little bit aggressive in nature. There's some combo deck variants of the Omni deck, and then there's like a Grixis Monument control deck that is very strong as well. The pillars of the format are kind of the Corey Steel deck. There is this chorus cycle of cards that synergize with each other that become very strong, and then there's kind of these tempo creature style decks that can wear multiple different hats. If I were to have to pick a deck, like I've been having a ton of success in the format with the various versions of Corey Steel decks, multiple events wins, finished top 1200 with it, so I'm very happy with that list there. The Monument decks are very strong. I haven't played the Omni decks, but they seem very strong as well. So probably best of one, I would go one of those routes, either hard control, dedicated turn 4-ish combo, or kill them on turn 3 or 4 with Corey Steel. But we'll cover a bunch of different decks today. So data's coming from Untapped. If you want to use Untapped, link is in the video description. And then the actual deck list will be pasted and timestamped in the video. So let's jump into it. The metagame, it's a little bit skewed right now because this comes April 8th through today, but popularity of the day, we're going to look just from the 29th through to the 1st. It's only about 2 days. The popularity of the day, Izzet Otters and Best of 1 is the most played deck. So Izzet Otters is kind of synonymous with the Corey Steel decks because there's some Otter synergies that get played there. And there's not like a 100% defined list. There's different variations. Played a bunch of them. I can offer some feedback in terms of what's the best. Grixis Heist is a very popular deck. It's lower on the win rates, but what could be lumped in here is the Monument decks as well. The Monument decks, I think, are much better than the Heist decks. Orzhov Pixie is kind of a tempo bounce deck. I think this deck reasonable. I had a lot of success early last season and then the previous season with the versions. I find it to struggle a little bit against aggro decks. I think it's better in best of, being more kind of traditional mid-rangey kind of decks. Azorius Artifacts, then you have Azorius Flyers, which is the Birds deck, Boros Mice, Orzhov Bats, kind of race pass deck also in there. So let's jump into it. There was 7,300 games played in the last 3 days. People are kind of picking up the format. So we're going to start off with the Omni combo. Yes, the deck that is doing very well in standard. Best of 1 also does really well here. Notably, we are looking platinum to mythic rank just because the ladder reset. So I want to kind of capture what's being played. Otherwise, we're not going to get much data. So this deck here is using a similar line where your Omniscience gets put into your graveyard and you Abuelas it back. Now, there's no battles in this format, so you can't go to your sideboard, do that combo. But basically what you're trying to do with this is with the dig until you get these Meringue River Regents, and then you have Legion Extruder, which deals 2 damage to any target. You loop 2 Regents, bouncing them back, and then you keep recasting Legion Extruder. You're able to kind of draw through your deck with like Rolling Dragonstorm, Confounding Riddle, Stock Up, Ill-Time Explosion, Meringue River Regent, Glacial Dragon Hunt, all ways to kind of dig through your deck. Now, notably, well, we're going to highlight it here, but it's going to come up through a lot of different decks. This is probably the most powerful cycle in this format. So we have this chorus package. So they're instants that have starting intensity. So think of it almost like Energy S counters, but it gets stapled onto the card. So this has starting intensity 2, so it deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to your intensity. So it starts off as just a shock. And then all your chorus cards in any zone increase their intensity by 1, and that's kind of perpetual static on the cards. There's also Hymn to Ages, 2 mana, starting intensity 1, and you draw a card. But this oftentimes, when you play the cards, will let you draw 3, 4, 5 cards, especially with things like Stormchaser's Talent, when you can buy it back. So that helps you dig for the combo itself. So that's pretty much it. Within this format, you also have these lands that care if you're on the play or draw, so there's an advantage. So they usually allow you to fix your colors, and then if you're on the draw, they come into play untapped, so there's some benefit there. The mana base is much worse in this format, given we're missing half the fast lands and the pain lines in the format. So first iteration of Izzet Otters. Now this one is a little bit older in the sense it's not playing the newest card of the format. So I'm going to kind of bounce between 2 different decks. So the big card here, Swiftspear's Teaching. So this is a 1 mana sorcery. You get a 1-time boon. So just think of it as an emblem that goes away once a condition is met. So whenever you cast your next creature spell, it gains prowess and haste, and then it just draws a card for 1. Very powerful. Prowess does stack. So if you have something with prowess, it gets double prowess, triple prowess, how many times you have the boon. Very strong in that regard. This version's playing more of the Otters, so you have Enduring Friendship. This is another Alchemy card, so think of it as like super prowess for all your Otters. Whenever you cast instant or sorcery, all your other Otters get +1/1. And then when it dies, it becomes an enchantment, so like the rest of the Enduring that we saw in Duskmourn. It has double team. When you attack, you create a copy of the card in your hand, except it loses double team. So it's kind of 2 spells in 1 that allows you to have Quarry Steel. You have Elusive Otter, you have Thundertrap Trainer as well, and then the Chorus package kind of mixed into that sense. This other version, closer to what I'm playing, it has Slick Shot. This one's on Emberheart Challenger. I've been playing a mix of Draycatcher and Hearth Elemental in the place. Cut down on this town. But there's another card here that's very strong in terms of the effect. It's Tome of Gadwick. So this is a 1 mana equipment. So it's a cheap spell, but basically you equip your creature, and whenever it attacks, you get to conjure a card into your hand, and it's basically just a bunch of different cantrips. 1 mana, instant, and sorcery speed. Serum Visions, Brainstorm, Opt. So it just helps you get more card advantage to churn through your deck to play more spells, to trigger Prowess, to trigger Quarry Steel. It's also with the Emberheart Challenger in this version. By re-equipping it, it triggers Valiant, so you get some more card advantage that way there. I think Into the Floodmaw is very well suited. It deals with some of the non-creature decks. It can deal with bigger stuff. It's a good tempo play. It also, at times, can create a token for your opponent that allows your Ribald Shanty to have a target. In some of the control decks, they don't actually have targets for Ribald Shanty, so as much as possible with these decks, I found it successful to make sure that as many of your cards as possible and hit your opponent, or just be castable without a target for Quarry Steel. So there's those kind of 2 lists there. We have Orzhov Pixie. So this one here, I played a couple of different versions of this, but similar to Modern, we have Overlord of the Baelmark that's milling you, and then you have a Blink package. Instead of Felia, we have Dedicated Dollmaker, where you get to exile something, like a non-land permanent, and it becomes a copy of it, except it's legendary, it's an artifact. So you get to cast this for 2 mana, then blink it, and then get a 5/5, which is some great value. The big card of the format in white is Nagtuckman Shines Again. So all your creatures with mana value 2 or less perpetually get 1/1. So it buffs all your creatures in any zones, your deck, your graveyard, your play. Makes it very strong, because what you're trying to do with the second mode, it basically pulls a creature out of your deck and puts it into play. And with things like Nurturing Pixie, Sunpearl, Kirin, you get to bounce this back to your hand, and then basically the whole course, cast it over and over and over again to keep buffing up your team. So you have like 7/7 Pixies, for example. And then there's also this card here, Mischievous Lookout, that allows you to cast non-creature, non-aura permanents from your graveyard. And then it basically becomes a copy of, it becomes a 2/1. So you just basically get creature versions of this that then triggers themselves even more. Momentum Breaker, Nowhere to Run, Hopeless Nightmare that we see in the standard version. This version here is playing Scavenger Regent. This is basically a sweeper that can be picked up with the Pixie effects. One of the big things I found playing this deck, it's very good against Go Tall decks, but things like the Mice deck, anything that's going wide, it can suffer because a lot of your removal is 1-to-1. Things like Momentum Breaker, Nowhere to Run don't do great when your opponent's making multiple tokens per turn. The Zealous Flanker is just a flexible card, can deal graveyards, has those effects there. Boros Mice, 78%. So this deck here, we have the Nantuckum in here, we have the Manifold Mouse, Emberheart Challenger, notably Monstrous Rage is banned, and Heartfire Hero has been nerfed to 0/1, so it can't attack the turn. This one's playing more kind of traditional mice, Cheeky House Mouse, you have Flowerfoot Swordmaster, Valley Quest Caller for the Lord effect, you have Recruit Instructor. So this is whenever a mouse attacks, you draft a card from its spellbook, and this here is basically a bunch of pump effects as well as things like Embercleave. So a bunch of things that could trigger Valiant. And then it has the Valiant ability when it becomes target a spell or ability for your first time each turn, you create a 1/1 mouse. So this also helps you go wide. Sheltered by Ghost is removal, and then you have Valiant Emberkin. So haste 1/1, when it enters or attacks, target creature you control perpetually gets +1/0, so it just gives a boost, triggers Valiant. And then whenever, basically if you were to trigger Valiant on a creature, it gets an additional trigger. So it just doubles up any of those effects. So like making an extra token, getting an extra counter style thing. We then go to Azorius Birds. So there's a few different versions of how you can build this. You can go low to the ground with cheap counter spells like Spell Pierce. You can play bigger with like 3-Tree Battalion, which is, think of it as like Collected Company, but instead of picking 2 creatures, you pick 1 and then you offspring a second copy of it. Which plays well because you can kind of play tempo speed. We have very strong combo. So Awestruck Signet, it's a 1-mana 2/1 and then has the starting intensity ability. Whenever a creature flying enters, you increase its intensity. And then when you have 3 or more intensity, it becomes a 5/4. So there's a strong line where if you copy it with Mockingbird, it sees like the extra copies. So if you have lines of like this on 1, Mockingbird on 2, and then any sort of other flyer, you just get 5/4 flying vigilances on turn 2, which is very strong. Quest Caller, it works with the birds. Dazzling Denials, 2-mana, counter 4 since you're playing birds. Sheltered by Ghost is your main form of removal and life gain for racing. Wingbright Thief, so this has actually been buffed, so it's a 2-mana 2/2 now, and it's when it enters, you look at your opponent's hand, you choose a card. When they cast that card, you gain 3 life and draw a card. So kind of a weird-esque Thoughtseize style effect where you're disincentivizing your opponent from playing cards. The one thing I noticed with this really quick, the mana base is terrible here. I'm going to paste a different version in terms of the deck list. Very similar idea in terms of what it's doing, but this mana base is atrocious. Way too many tap lines, not enough like fixing, stuff like that. So I'll fix a better version of that. So we have Grixis Monument. So this is basically, it's a very, this takes a while to win, but it's very redundant in terms of what it's doing. So you have Monument Endurance in addition to Artist's Talent. So Artist's Talent, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you discard a card, you draw, and then you can also activate Mode 2 in this one. That will allow you to have your spells cost 1 less. So you have the chorus package in here. You have the Ribald Chanty, Hymn to Ages, but you also have Mesellic Ballad. So this is another one that plays into this course. That's 4 mana. Each player sacrifices X creatures. You gain X life, where X is your intensity. So the core of this deck here is you land a Monument, and then you just cast spells, draw, discard, and then you trigger Monument over and over and over again. You can make copies of Monument with 3 steps ahead, and you're basically just going to burn your opponent out with that. You can basically recycle these effects by playing Archival Whirl. Think of it as Time Twister, but if you give your opponent a copy of Ristic Study into play, then only you shuffle your library and draw 7 cards. You have 2 copies of this, so you're basically continually looping these to the point where these, like, I've played games where this 2 mana draw 10, or this is like gain 10 life. You don't have creatures, so it doesn't really matter. Glacial Dragon Hunt's a newer card in the deck that helps you kind of curate your hand and help you dig, and it braids a concession to the various Corey Steel decks, just being able to hit that. So very strong deck. The mirrors are quite atrocious to play. It's kind of whoever sticks a talent and then can protect endurance, but then it's off to the races. Sometimes you just draw Ribald Chanties and there's no targets in that matchup. There is a new card Something Lash. It's an Izzet 2-mana spell. It deals 3 damage, and then you get a boon whenever you cast your next non-creature spell, you draw a card. I've seen some lists starting to play that. Just another way to deal, because that can deal damage to the face as well, so it can also help you in the race. And then it does work with Artist Talent Stage 3, where it can basically deal 5 damage instead of something you might want to consider there. Boros Aggro, let's call it Mobilize. So this got a couple new cards. We have Waystone's Guidance, 2 mana. It's an enchantment. Attacking tokens get +1/0. Works really nice with your various aggressive mobilized creatures. And then whenever you cast your first spell each turn, that's a creature, that spell gains Mobilize 2. So it kind of sticks on that creature. It's very strong because creatures that normally don't have Mobilize would get Mobilized. And then if it already has Mobilize, it just stacks. So things like Stadium Headliner would enter and become Mobilize 3. Voice of Victory is Mobilize 4. That all works in that case. There's also a new card in Thunder Bond Vanguard. So its power toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control. But what's really interesting in this deck is the second line of text. Each creature token you control enters as a copy of this creature. So your mobilized tokens just enter as these very large creatures instead. Scalable to the number of creatures you have. 3 Tree Battalions, kind of the Coco. You have a Braid, Shocking Sharpshooter's a ping effect, Burst Lightning's cheap removal, Swiftspear into Voice of Victory's a disgusting line. You have Regal Bunnicorn as well in here that scales with the number of creatures you have. There is Mardu versions going around with the new Mardu Dragon 3-drop. I've seen it quite a bit. It could have very impressive turns. The mana base seems atrocious because you're playing a bunch of tap lands in an aggressive deck. It can be very swingy. I haven't found a list that I've liked enough. Again, the data is a little slow, but that's something to keep in mind of. It's just, like I said, 3-color mana bases are hard in standard, and the mana is much worse in this format. So I hedge against that, perhaps. So we have Grixis Heist, 69%. So how Heist works is basically you look at it generates 3 non-land permanents from your opponent's deck, and you get to take one and put it into exile, and you can cast it as though it's any mana. The big kind of card here is Triumphant Getaway. You get to Heist twice, and then it is an enchantment that sticks around that whenever you cast a spell you don't own, you gain and drain 2 life. So that's predominantly your win condition. Weave of Nightmare is a flexible card. It could be a counterspell, it could be removal, -5/5, or you heist your opponent's library. If you control one of your opponent's permanents, you could choose 2 of these. So kind of a Cryptic Command-esque effect. Ghost Vacuum for Graveyard Hate. Grave Expectation can either heist an opponent's library, you exile 3 cards from their graveyard, and gain 3 life. So some flexibility. You have the Storm Chasers, this town, which you could also bounce the Triumphant. You have the Shanty package, or the Chorus package, and then just kind of removal. You're just a Grixis Control deck that's winning through Triumphant. Getaway is your main win condition. We have Jeskai Dragons, 65%. So similar to Standard, but this deck here has a pseudo-infinite combo. So you can do this in Standard, but people in Alchemy have been doing this for a while now. If you dedicated Dollmaker your 3 Blind Mice, it can make copies of the token copies, so you exponentially get 3 Blind Mice as your win condition. So the first time it makes 1, and then you get 2 the next time because the triggers go off, then you get 4, and it goes to town. You're a Jeskai Control deck, you have things like Helix, High Noon versus the aggressive decks, like the Corey Steel decks, cheap counters, cheap removals, Discover the Way for card filtering, Case of the Lost Witness. So you put a copy of Fibblethip into your library, draw a card, and if you control Fibblethip, you solve the case, and then it basically lets you play cards from the top of your library. So it's virtual card advantage that way there. Elspeth plays the token theme. You have a full set of Wrath of Gods of your sweeper, some Roaring Furnace, some more card advantage there. Then have Selesnya Rabbits, 65%. So the big card here that we don't have in Standard is both Amara. This will allow you to convoke, so you get it as early as turn 2. Then you get to take from its spell book. It's just a bunch of convoke threats. There's the big Allosaur Shepherd, there's Knight Errant of Eos, so a bunch of different effects there. There's also Buxton. This has been nerfed to be 6 mana, but similar effect. Basically at your end step, looks at the number of tapped creatures you have, and then it pulls a non-land permanent from your library into play. Otherwise, it's pretty much similar. This is another deck. I'm going to find a better, cleaner version because the mana base is pretty terrible on this one here. Some of the numbers seem a little off. They don't usually play Raise the Past, but strategy there. And lastly is Azorius Artifacts. So this deck here is a synth deck. In this format, you have Reflection Net, which is just another removal style effect. You have Assimilation Aegis, Landlord Navigator. If you have 2 artifacts come into play, you conjure a copy of Thieving Magpie into play, that draws you cards. There's also Imperium Thopterist, where at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a copy of Ornithopter into your hand, and then it's a lord for your Thopters, so continually kind of feeding that there. But otherwise, just kind of an artifact affinity style shell. So that's it. Good luck to those playing. Like I said, I have my picks. I'm going to likely be running Prowess. Been very good for me. But I will come out with the best of 3 one in a couple days once we get a little bit more data, just to prep folks for the format. If you have any questions about the format, card inclusion, stuff like that, we've been discussing some stuff in my Discord, but feel free to drop questions as well. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one and stay safe.